The marble floor of the luxury restaurant gleamed under the sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows, but the brightness of the day could not soften the tension in the air. At one corner table, a man in a flawless gray suit leaned back in his chair with the easy arrogance of someone who had never been told no. His laugh echoed across the room, a booming, dismissive sound that made heads turn. Across from him, a young girl barely 10 years old sat stiffly, her hands hovering over the polished wooden chessboard. Her wide eyes revealed both fear and determination. While beside her stood her mother, dressed in the red uniform of a waitress, clutching her order pad as though it was her lifeline. The Billionaire's CEO smirked and pointed at the board. "Win this," he said with cruel amusement, "and I'll give you $100 million." He laughed again, confident this was nothing but a game to mock the poor waitress and her child. The man's name was Michael Hayes, a titan of industry, known across Austin as both a ruthless businessman and a man who thrived on humiliating those he deemed beneath him. He had built his empire on power plays, boardroom battles, and crushing rivals without mercy. To him, life was nothing but a game, and money was the scoreboard. That afternoon, when he noticed the waitress struggling to juggle plates and still glancing nervously at her daughter waiting by the staff corner, he saw an opportunity for amusement. He beckoned them over, his smile sharp as glass, and proposed the outrageous challenge. To him, it was entertainment. To them, it was a moment that could change everything. The waitress's name was Charlotte Evans, and life had been merciless to her. She had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but life's storms had forced her into survival mode. Her husband had abandoned her years earlier, leaving her alone with her daughter, Rebecca. Every day was a struggle to keep a roof over their heads, to make sure Rebecca had food to eat, and to keep her innocence intact despite the harsh world pressing down on them. Yet, even in the midst of hardship, Charlotte Evans had poured everything she had into her daughter's love for learning. And Rebecca, with her quiet determination, had developed a fascination with strategy games, especially chess. Charlotte Evans had often worked late into the night, coming home exhausted, only to find Rebecca sitting at the kitchen table, small hands moving the worn wooden chess pieces her mother had found at a thrift store. Sometimes she played against herself, whispering moves aloud as though challenging an invisible opponent. Other times, she stayed awake until Charlotte Evans could join her, teaching her mother strategies she had picked up from old library books. Chess became their escape, the game where victory wasn't decided by money or privilege, but by patience, practice, and intellect. So when Michael Hayes leaned forward, laughing as he taunted them, Charlotte Evans' heart clenched in fear, but also sparked with a glimmer of hope. She wanted to say no to shield her daughter from the cruelty of this man, but Rebecca's small hand reached out and touched hers. With steady eyes, the little girl whispered, "I can do this, Mom." The game began. The restaurant quieted as word spread. Servers carrying trays slowed their steps. Diners leaned back to watch, and the soft clinking of silverware faded into silence. It was as though the entire room held its breath. Michael Hayes moved his black knight with theatrical flair, smirking at the child across from him. Rebecca sat perfectly still, her hands folded, studying the board with intensity far beyond her years. Then, with careful precision, she moved a pawn forward. Michael Hayes chuckled, shaking his head. "Predictable," he muttered. But Rebecca wasn't rattled. She watched, waited, and responded with moves that carried hidden purpose. Charlotte Evans stood behind her, her heart pounding louder with every tick of the wall clock. The game stretched on, each move pulling the audience deeper into the unspoken battle. Michael Hayes played aggressively, seeking to dominate quickly. Rebecca countered with quiet, deliberate moves, setting traps he didn't notice until it was too late. Slowly, the smile began to fade from his face. His arrogance dimmed as realization dawned. This was no ordinary child. Memories of nights spent at the kitchen table flashed through Charlotte Evans's mind. She saw her daughter's persistence, the way she had refused to give up even when she lost game after game, and the light in her eyes when she finally began to win. Charlotte Evans's throat tightened as she realized all those nights, all those struggles had been leading here to this very moment. Michael Hayes grew restless, his hand gripping the table edge. He was not a man who lost, not in business, not in games, not in life. Yet here he was, his queen cornered, his strategies unraveling against the quiet brilliance of a child. Rebecca leaned forward, her small fingers gently moving her rook into position. "Check," she said softly. The word hum in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the room. Michael Hayes's face turned pale, his confident mask cracking. He scrambled to find an escape, but the truth was undeniable. His king had nowhere to run. One final move, and the game was over. Rebecca whispered the last word, checkmate. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the restaurant erupted in applause. Strangers rose to their feet, clapping for the little girl who had just humbled a billionaire. Tears filled Charlotte Evans's eyes as she knelt beside her daughter, holding her close. She whispered, "I'm so proud of you," her voice trembling with emotion. Michael Hayes sat frozen, his hands limp on the table. For the first time in years, he had been bested not by another titan of industry, but by a child whose strength came not from wealth, but from resilience and heart. In that moment, something shifted within him. The laughter, the arrogance, the cruel amusement, all of it crumbled. He looked at the girl and her mother, and shame burned his face. "You've won." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black checkbook. His hand shook as he wrote the figure, $100 million, and signed it. He pushed it across the table, but Charlotte Evans hesitated, staring at it with wide eyes. Money had never been the point. The true victory was her daughter's strength. Still, she knew what this meant, a chance to change their lives forever, to finally breathe without fear of tomorrow. Tears streamed down Charlotte Evans's cheeks as she accepted the check with trembling hands. Around them, the applause grew louder, not just for the money, but for the moment itself, a reminder that greatness can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest truths. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that true power lies not in wealth, but in courage and inner strength, and that dignity can humble even the most arrogant, please like this video, subscribe to Third Person View, and share it with someone who needs to believe in the underdog, or anyone who thinks life's greatest lessons come in small packages. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that challenge perspectives and uplift hearts. Before we close, I want to ask you, what do you think Michael Hayes truly learned from this encounter? Was it just about losing, or something deeper about humility and respect? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.